Today is the first day in a week that I haven't been in the kitchen baking some Hamantaschen with my kids. As many of you know, I wrote a little bit about my experience of baking with an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old and the lessons that the ugly Hamantaschen that we first started out making and the more beautiful Hamantaschen that started coming out of the oven after several tries. What the difference between the two, when you put them side by side, made you realize that it's kind of like life, that there's the ugly and there's the beautiful, and sometimes it's the ugly stuff that really is they're the blessings. And the good stuff, you bite into it and you discover, for those of us who hate prune, that it's really prune in there, that the good stuff tends to sometimes become the not so good stuff, and realize what a powerful lesson that is just from standing in the kitchen and cooking some Hamantaschen. But there were a couple other things that I started thinking about as I stared for 20 hours at these little cookies that we eat on Purim. And I realized that Hamantaschen are not really what we think they are. Hamantash is a singular of Hamantaschen. And really, if you go back in time, there really was no such thing as a Hamantash. There was something, and those of you who really do Yiddish, I apologize, but from my transliteration of the Yiddish, there was something called a Mantaschen, or in German, a Montaschen. Both of these things mean a poppy seed-filled pouch. And in fact, in German, a Tasch is a pouch or a purse. So they think that originally Hamantaschen weren't Hamantaschen. They were poppy seed-filled little pastry pouches that were eaten by people in the areas of Eastern Europe. And eventually, over time, the Jews kind of adopted it because it had the 3 corners, and there was the idea that Haman had a 3-cornered hat, and therefore, instead of Montaschen, it became Hamantaschen. In Israel, many don't even call them Hamantaschen. Anybody know what they're called? Oznei Haman, which means the ears of Haman. Okay, it's not Haman's hat. They're Haman's ears. And actually, I just found something online tonight, and I don't know if this is just a fluke, but I found a recipe, and here's my terrible Spanish. How do you say ears in Spanish? Orejas Haman. I saved it, so it's an old Sephardic recipe from a family in, I don't remember, maybe Peru or something, that's online. They claim it goes back 4, 5, 6 generations. Who knows? But the fact is, in many places, there is no Hamantaschen. There's no hat of Haman. It's actually not, it's the purse of Haman. But these ears of Haman. And I started to think, everybody gets mad on Hanukkah when I stand up here and I kind of burst the Hanukkah bubble and I talk about the fact that there is no Hanukkah oil. And I got a little annoyed as I started thinking about this because I never really did spend much time thinking about the fact that, this really isn't an old Jewish tradition. It's an old German tradition that was kind of adopted and embraced. And it's been around for a long time, don't get me wrong, but I think there's an important lesson here in that just because we call it Hamantaschen, or Haman's ears, or Haman's hat, we have to be careful on Purim not to go by appearance and not to go just by what something is called. Just because it looks like Haman's hat, it might be his ears. Or maybe it's just a poppy seed purse. Who knows what it really is? And when you think about that, what do we do as human beings on Purim? We dress in costumes. And if you do a really good job, the question is oh, who is that? My best costumes are last year when I went as that infamous political figure. And I was walking up and down the halls. Many people had no idea it was me. And that was part of the fun. Part of the fun of Purim is kind of becoming someone else. You are not really who you are. What's this teaching us? That we have to be very careful. Don't assume that things are the way they are. And there's this question, is it hat? Is it a Haman's hat? Is it Haman's ears? Is Haman all-powerful? Or is he really a failed, weak dictator? How about Queen Esther? Is she a glamorous princess, or is she really a tough Jewish heroine? Is Mordecai a bumbling old uncle, or is he an undercover spy that unearths a terrible secret that because of it he saves the Jewish people? There are these dualities in Purim. Is a role reversal in Purim. The very powerful leaders become the weak people. And the weak people become the strong people. And hats become pouches, become ears. And just when you think you have figured out what lies inside, and you bite into it waiting to have that chocolate, you might run into prune. So there's another very interesting thing about Haman. The idea that we bake these cookies and we talk, whether it's Haman's hat or Haman's ears, we're talking about eating this person who was such a villain, his ears or his hat, and we're rejoicing in his death. Now, Adar, the Jewish month of Purim, is the most joyful month in our calendar. The rabbis teach us that when Adar started about a week and a half ago, the Jewish calendar became even more joyful. Why? Because this is the month where we defeated Haman, where Haman was hung and the enemy was stopped. Problem is if you're familiar with the book Pirkei Avot, which is a very